vehicle like a fucking bartender doing a trick shot for tips? Well, do we have a solution for you? It's the turbo pump. Looks like an IV Dr. Mario would use. Here's how it works. You stick this tube in there, you flick the clitoris, and bingo bango bongo, you're easily transferring gas, water, oil, and more. Now check this shit out. Watch how fast it's able to drain my piss jug. It is emptying my PP tank into this drinking glass in record time for me to enjoy this beverage later. Too fucking stupid to understand gravity? Well, don't worry. We'll go ahead and take the thinking right out of the equation here. Just press a button. You can do that, right? You fucking idiot? You goddamn troglodyte? No problem. Turbo Pump has turbo siphon technology. Look at this shit. Look at how fast it drains this. If you put this shit in the ocean, we'd have no ocean left. Gone are the days of dipping the straw into the gas tank. Now look like a supervillain with a James Bond gadget sitting on top of your lawnmower. Fill up your weed whacker, looking cool and shit like a secret agent. Dinosaurs are extinct and now so are your problems thanks to the Turbo Pump.
When most people think of an SCP, they think of the SCP itself.
Turbo
like
pump that bitch.
Or the heart to destroy reptile,
or
other such monsters
this bad
and
boy would
anomalies.
suck every last drop of semen out
While
of a
those
penis if you
are
wanted it to.
concerns
Are you
to
some
the
type of sick
Foundation and need to
sociopath
be
that wants to
contained,
murder their fish?
there are also
Go ahead and
plenty of
fucking drink the
anomalies
water,
that
kill them,
produce
go
their
wild.
own
Fuck the
waste
bathtub.
as a byproduct of their existence. And while usually this waste isn't too harmful, it does need to be taken care of. That process is where the Acroamatic Abatement Department comes in, an entire division of the Foundation devoted to handling anomalous waste, as these substances can't simply be flushed down a toilet or burned away without potential ramifications down the line, especially if multiple types of waste intermingle. It's certainly a big problem, and as the Foundation grows and more SCPs fall under their purview, the amount of anomalous waste they have to deal with similarly grows, and it all has to be processed. The Admonition series of SCP articles deals with the Foundation trying out various miraculous ways to deal with some of their big problems, but discovering that there really are no shortcuts. Let's take a look at how they might handle their waste problem, and what the ramifications of their shortcuts are.
We did what we had to.
We're first given a notice from the Oracle Collective, informing us that an iteration of Central North Authority, titled Our Foundation, has been formally audited regarding compliance with organization objectives outlined in the 1981 Multi-Foundation Coalition Agreement. Advance notice regarding this was not established, as this iteration's Oracle position has been vacant for several decades, with no suitable replacement representative made known to the collective. The following report then consists of recovered files regarding the iteration in question, and the audit was manually conducted under direct supervision of Oracle Prime. What that all boils down to then is that we're looking at some version of the Foundation that's under investigation for their compliance with the objectives of the Multiversal Foundation organization. The first item under investigation are post-mortem files regarding prior timeline iteration, with the assessment being that it was a misuse of authority resources which precipitated an enhanced ascension of a Tier 4 cosmological anomaly. What they're referring to is SCP-6820, the first in the Admonition series, in which a Foundation tried to permanently kill SCP-682, but failed. This timeline was reconstituted by Goldbaker and Associates, an anomalous insurance company, at significant expense. The second item is a hazardous document regarding local patasphere instability, which also involved a misuse of authority resources, precipitating the enhanced ascension of a Tier 4 cosmological anomaly. This refers to SCP-6747, in which a Foundation tried to use pataphysics to resurrect a deceased individual, but failed. The third item is an imperceptible document regarding local noosphere instability, in which again misuse of authority resources precipitated the enhanced ascension of a Tier 4 cosmological anomaly. This refers to SCP-6659, in which a Foundation tried to create a device that could kill gods, but failed. Item 4 are system files regarding the destruction of a local cybersphere, in which misuse of authority resources precipitated the enhanced ascension of a Tier 4 cosmological anomaly and the ejection of an additional rogue element. This refers to SCP-6488, in which a Foundation created an AI to contain any deviant AIs, but failed. It seems then that all of the admonition articles have been occurring in one version of the Foundation, with it being patched up from time to time. Finally, we have Item 5, compiled documents regarding an explicit breach of contract, which is what we're reading now. I wonder how this one will end up. We're provided a document from the desk of Dr. Dougal Deering, in which he discusses what waste is. It reads, "What is waste? The dictionary defines, well, nothing, actually. We define. The dictionary only records our definitions. Even that term is misleading. The dictionary, as though there were only one. Merriam-Webster probably says that waste, noun, is nothing but a useless byproduct of something better. Accurate so far as it goes, but it doesn't go nearly far enough. That's our fault. The worst kind of waste they're aware of is spent nuclear fuel, or carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Their definition was written without having borne witness to the irreducible Nascimbenium cores powering innumerable impossible mad science projects, or the infernal combustion engines punching holes in the noazone layer with their demonosulfuric emissions. That's the kind of waste our dictionary takes into account. Metal that absorbs psychic signals and grows like cancer. Balls of backward-flowing time. Orichalcum, adamant, and ectoplasm. The colostomy from out of space. An endless catalog of anomalous fallout and excreta which only we can ameliorate, because only we can see it, because we set the world up that way. But we're getting tired of seeing it. After all this time, this endless uphill landfill slog, we need to see clear blue sky beyond our horizon of trash. If only putting the waste out of mind could also put it out of sight. One might be forgiven for wishing that the very concept could be erased from our manifest of magic, as the gutters overflow with anomalous ooze and the gray goo projections turn perilously proximal. One might be forgiven for wishing that the dictionary truly did define, and that by changing the definition of waste, we could change the very thing itself. But forgiveness is never guaranteed. That's what gives it meaning. We're also given an undated photograph from Dr. Deering's files, showing a young man and woman side by side in black and white. Next, we're provided an incident report from September of 2028 from the Achromatic Abatement Facility AAF-D. The recording officer is Dr. Nyo from Psychology and Parapsychology at Site-43, and she's interviewing Dr. Deering. His hands are bandaged, and he is sitting very still, as if recovering from heavy sedation. She begins by asking him what he was doing in AAF-D when the incident occurred, to which he says that he was supervising a flush. She asks what that entails, and he explains flatly that AAF-D is the powerhouse of Site-43's abatement plant, the single largest anomalous waste facility ever constructed. Since the effluence crisis escalated globally, it's been doing non-stop quadruple duty, so every few years they have to shut it down, for no longer than an hour. Any longer than that, and the whole system backs up irrecoverably. But they have to pump the overflow into the anachronic sump below the site, because their output is severely lagging behind their input. They're overwhelmed and operating on triage principles. Any substance requiring too much time or too heavy a resource commitment to abate has to be set aside, because certain other abatements are too time-sensitive to delay. Some of the anomalous effects of the waste can worsen the longer they're kept in the pipeline, without even getting into what they can do to the pipes themselves. When they do the flush, they're often already white hot, or ice cold, or humming obscenities in Latin. It's always a close call, because they can't afford to do it any more often than every few years, without the whole system failing. All this really does, though, is just buy them more time, and the sump under the facility is getting full as well. The man in charge of the flush this year was Deputy Chief of Janitorial and Maintenance Philip Deering, his brother. Dr. Nyo asked if he was supervising him then, but Deering just said that he was visiting him, as they never speak to each other despite working in the same facility for decades. They talked about a toy that Deering found in the basement of their parents' house, which consists of a single sliding door. He explains that it makes things disappear, and Dr. No places her Site-43 bath pin in the apartment and closes it, at which point it vanishes. She asks him how it works, to which he says that it's magic, as he's an occultist. He didn't end up giving it to him, though, and says that he's not as familiar with the abatement facility as he used to be, and they've had to make a lot of changes to keep up with the pressure. Apparently, there were 2 pipes, side by side, each containing very different types of anomalous waste, with a junction connecting them that allowed for combining their contents under specific emergency circumstances. This is normally done via remote control, but there is a valve there to allow manual access during accidents, and it apparently moved when Deering bumped into it.
You captured Zone C.
Possibly this was due to metal fatigue, but he thinks more likely that they were already in the early stages of a total collapse, and this was just the first sign. Those pipes were full to bursting with material, when they should have been almost empty. He doesn't think that they hadn't been flushed properly, but the people working there are under a lot of pressure, and the materials are unpredictable. Either way, there's a lot more waste in the system than expected, and it might have come blasting out if it hadn't bumped out. The materials then mixed inappropriately, and the waste in one pipe, the Orphic outflow, instantly became every version of itself it had ever been simultaneously, before, during, and after abatement. He says that it looks like an army of colored ghosts all melted together, bursting out of the pipes like steam.
You lost Zone C.
His brother headed for the nearest suction pump controllers, which are located in every room and corridor, and which would cause all of the waste to get sucked into the sinkhole without further incident. He was met halfway there by something which manifested behind him, something writhing and diffusing. It sucked up most of the airborne effluents, and then it crushed itself audibly down to his side. Deering began shouting that it moved right through his brother, overlaid itself on him, coiled around him, and started to shrink. His brother's eyes rolled back, his skin shriveled in against his bones, and split where his organs were, and they burst out of him. He melted into a pile all over the floor,
You
and
captured
then it was
Zone A.
gone. Deering heaves and begins hyperventilating for a few seconds before recovering, remarking that he doesn't think his brother felt it.
You
Dr.
lost
Nyo
Zone
says
A.
that he then turned the handle himself for the suction pump, but Deering replies that he doesn't remember. They have it on camera, however, which is how Deering's hands got injured, as the controls were compromised from the ghost being out too long. Deering asks why they dragged him through all this again if they have it on camera, to which she says that she just needed to hear his version of the report, which is standard procedure. She then asks how she gets her pin back, and he tells her to just shake the toy to the left or apart. He says that it was never gone, as it's just a slide to the right and a little mirror to hide the evidence. No magic at all, just a trick. We're given a note telling us that this interview confirms Deering's initial testimony immediately after the event, in which he reported the
I'm
presence
not
of a rogue
surprised.
entity
Somebody
that
else
killed his
comes
brother.
up there that helps.
No personnel reviewing the
They've
security
all
camera
been
footage of the
saved that
incident,
way.
however, are
They've
able
all
to
been
perceive
saved that
any
way,
entity,
so I don't know.
even under negative treatment. On the recommendation of Dr. Nyo and the chief of
That's
janitorial
the
and
funny
maintenance,
part. They've all
Deering
been
has been
saved that way.
prescribed
I've
1
almost
year's
killed the water.
mandatory mental health.
Your team is ready.
Not even like I'm losing
With
the
that,
kill.
we're finally given the file for SCP-7243 itself, which, like nearly all the
You shouldn't
Admonition
even say
anomalies
this
so
goddamn
far,
word.
has been given a containment class of Found, meaning that the Foundation uses it in some way to assist in containing their SCPs. We're not given the anomaly's description yet, but its assigned departments are the Terrachronology Department, meaning that it deals with time in some way, the EM Center, the Logistics Branch, the Acromatic Abatement Department, and Applied Placeholder's document is the project lead, with 058 as an advisor, and Deering and Director Ilsa Reinders are the research heads. The containment procedures tell us that 7243 must only abate acromatic waste materials which do not exist, and cannot under any circumstances be used to neutralize anything measurably extant. This is why it has the absentia secondary containment class, which are anomalies used by the
And he throws the
Foundation
feet at
to
me.
ensure the absence of non-existent phenomena. What this means then is that it's a bit of a tricky one to wrap your head around, as it's a device that handles things that don't exist, and the logistics branch maintains a global network of consolidation and supply lines for transport of non-existent material. These transports are empty. The network handles nothing, and the empty containers are voided into SCP-7243. We're given another note, presumably from Deering, in which he states that waste is when a thing full of life and promise, a thing of beauty, is obliterated before its full potential is realized. Waste is snuffing out a light in our darkest hour. Waste is death, and he is going to kill it. We're then given a few dark, unclear photographs showing what appears to be the interior of a complex facility. This is followed by an addendum consisting of an excerpt from a research paper written by Director Reinders, titled Acromatic Abatement
Karma comes
and
back
Use.
and bites him in
In
the
case of
Hey,
emergency,
can I be
do
good?
not
No, I
break
can't.
glass. The abstract of the paper reads,
You know,
in principle,
if
the
I get
Foundation
mad,
only
maybe.
considers neutralization of anomalous phenomena where
Like, you know what I
containment
mean?
is infeasible and
if I get
uncontainment
mad,
is
they
undesirable.
because
Generally, if one
if it was a
anomaly produces
one-on-one
another,
type of
that new
situation,
phenomenon should also be
and he
contained
fought
and studied.
fairly instead of
When these byproducts are
Turtle,
generated
he would've got
continuously,
fired.
however, their
Like,
containment will
there's-
eventually
if
become
you don't
infeasible,
abuse the
and so the
mechanics of
criteria
matter,
is
it's
met
bad.
for their
There's
disposal.
no, you're not
Mass
fucking good,
containment
bro.
facilities, particularly those specialized
That's why
in
they do
biological
They
containment,
use feet,
are already
or they
equipped
abuse
with
the
immense
nurse, or they're
infrastructures for
or they wait until
disposing
you
of
almost dead to
conventional
get it.
waste. Unfortunately, these systems cannot contend with unconventional waste, the esoteric properties of which may eventuate any number of unforeseen issues. Each year, innumerable breaches are caused by the reaction of multiple anomalous substances in spaces they should never have occupied in the first instance. Garbage dumpsters, sewage tanks, ventilation systems, and the like. This leaves our most crucial sites with the issue of storing, transporting, and neutralizing large concentrations of volatile, esoteric effluents on a case-by-case basis for an arbitrary number of anomalies with arbitrary properties ad infinitum. This is the ever-progressing front on which acromatic abatement does battle. It attempts to generalize the problems of safe storage, transport, and amelioration for arbitrary acromatic waste. These are extremely messy problems to solve, and not just in the practical sense. Theoretically, acromatic abatement deals in the development of containment and neutralization techniques for all possible anomalous effects, and accounting for their potential interactions with all other anomalous effects. At time of writing, no singular inciting element has been identified as the cause to which the entire known range of anomalous phenomena can be attributed. In the opinion of this acroamaticist, no such element exists. Definitionally, anomalies subvert generally accepted models of how reality works, and so their classification is determined by whether they are congruent with our limited human understanding. There is no Swan boson or similar phenomenon that grants a substance the quality of defying expectation. It is therefore impossible to develop a comprehensive technique which can strip any arbitrary substance of its anomalous properties with certainty, short of developing rigorous scientific explanations for those properties and conveying them pedagogically to the human populace entirely. As such, the primary approach of acroamatic abatement has been to group esoteric substances into broad classes based on their properties, developing containment and treatment strategies for each class and subclass therein. This classification system is necessarily non-rigorous and cannot comprehensively describe all acroamatic material, for reasons aforementioned, but a more effective model has yet to be developed. Next, we have some correspondence between Deering and the chief of janitorial and maintenance, who is also his brother's wife. She accuses him of killing her husband, to which he replies that if he had had even 1 second to react, he would have tried to save him, but he's sorry the system let him and her down. He's sorry they let it decline so far and so fast, and at this point they can't even begin to predict how these increasingly volatile materials will interact with each other and their obsolete equipment. The entity which killed his brother could have resulted from any number of things, and all they can do is rededicate themselves to the cause he gave his life for. She only responds, however, that he killed her husband. Only him. He says that nobody on Earth understands what she lost the way he does, and he understands if she needs someone to blame, as he's the head of acroamatic abatement. They can't lose sight of the fact that what killed him was an extreme statistical outlier under nobody's control, and after all of their efforts, things like that still exist and are even multiplying. If they dwell on their mistakes, they'll overtake them, so they can't give up on their quest to figure out where all of this is coming from and how to send it back there. She replies that he can't even call Philip his brother, not even in a letter, and tells him to take responsibility for once in his life. There never was an entity, as he's the only one who claims to have seen it, and whatever he might believe, he's not that important. When she asked Philip if Deering was coming to his deputy chief promotion, he said probably not, as he'd be too ashamed. He'd internalized that for so long that he didn't even think to be sad about it. That's when she realized that she was going to have to hate him, well before he finally did something to really earn it. She says that he's incapable of facing up to anything he thinks reflects poorly on himself, so he makes excuses for why he shouldn't have to. He can't attend the ceremony because of a scheduling conflict, not because he can't stand admitting that he shares DNA with a glorified janitor. He can't come to the wedding because it's even worse seeing more janitor blood seeping into the family. He can't take a break from dissolving parathylene like an industrious little worm to allow even a single genuine moment of base human connection. He can't admit he bumped into a piece of sensitive equipment because he was too preoccupied with the cleverness of his weak, self-centered peace offering and killed the only person on the planet who ever had even the tiniest scrap of respect for him. She ends by saying that Philip never reflected poorly on him, but he reflects poorly on Philip, and to his infinite credit, that never crossed his mind. And amidst the darkness and despair, there came a shining light. Our sponsor for this episode, Spotify for Podcasters. Spotify for Podcasters is the best way I've found for creating and distributing a podcast, allowing you to record episodes straight from your phone or computer, and then easily distributing them to Spotify and everywhere else podcasts are heard. They even do video podcasts on Spotify, along with Q&As and polls to have conversations directly with fans. Even better, Spotify for Podcasters lets you earn money in a variety of ways, including ads and podcast subscriptions. And best of all, it's entirely free to use, with no catch. I use it personally for the Exploring series, and I have no complaints, so I highly recommend trying it yourself. Download the Spotify for Podcasters app, or head to www.spotify.com/podcasters to get started. Now, back to the episode. While some might be hesitant to respond to such a scathing message, Deering replies asking what he can do to make this right. He tells her that she's the best sanitation engineer in a facility full of certified geniuses, and he wants her to give him a selfless goal that Philip would have been proud to see achieved, so that he can show her that he's never been more determined in his life. She replies with a short but incredibly daunting task: no more waste. He says okay, and later, through a series of messages, that he's working on it, and that he can see it on the horizon, but he's going to need her help to see it through. While these exchanges were going on, Deering was also in contact with placeholder McDoctorate, telling him that he knows he's dividing his attention between a great many projects right now, but he'll want to be involved in this. He says that placeholder's time is short, and they can't ignore the achromatic abatement problem anymore, or else it's going to be their species' meteor strike. Deering is the only one with the drive to deflect this thing hanging over their heads, and while Placeholder is trying to save the world for the third, fourth, or fifth time, he asks if he's content with it being his last. Placeholder then replies, saying that they should talk. Thus, we get the description for SCP-7243, the Deering Placeholder Latent Existential Abatement Engine, an advanced industrial Eigen machine designed for comprehensive mass disposal of generalized esoteric waste. It's housed within Achromatic Abatement Facility Exactus, the bottommost structure of Site-43, and it's the largest waste processing facility on Earth, responsible for a 95% decrease in global achromatic waste production. From the baseline perspective, the engine processes no waste, as rather than actively detoxifying esoteric effluents like most abatement, it instead performs a novel procedure which ensures the non-existence of any effluents which it would be used to abate. Were any substance to be deposited into the engine, the substance would be instantly annihilated, retrocausally from all of space-time. This means then that the substance would never have existed at all, and thus could not have been deposited into the engine in the first place. This paradoxical scenario would normally generate a buildup of retrocausal quantum, which would induce a CK-class temporal paradox. 7234, however, absorbs the imminent paradox and redirects the quanta into the immediate past, colliding with the paradoxical substance, causing its annihilation. This forms a stable time loop, wherein the substance's non-existence is self-justified. To an observer, then, 7243 prevents the creation of any waste which it would be used to neutralize, because it essentially erases it before it even
Kills on
exists.
my own teammate.
This means that as long as all the necessary infrastructure remains in place and functional to deliver any waste to the engine, no waste will ever manifest at all. In other words, they have to keep dumping empty barrels into the engine so that nothing ever appears in those barrels. To date, 97% of all anomalies that would normally generate waste no longer do so thanks to the existence of 7243. We're then provided an audio transcript taken from the Site 43 achromatic abatement section, shortly after the initial approval of 7243. Deering's sister-in-law, Amelia, is paging through the schematics, calls him insane, as this will never work, and in the best-case scenario, the Temporal Anomalies Department has to assassinate him last week. He replies that it's just math, with 1 minus 1 equaling 0. But she says it's more like 1 plus minus 1 equals minus 1 plus 1. She asks how he can even build something capable of this, which he says is why he brought Placeholder on board. He's certain that they can do this as written, and they've consulted with Rangers, so the failsafes are foolproof. Amelia is not convinced, however, and tells him that this is a mistake that will all come crashing down. Deering says it won't if it's properly, with redundancies and the best engineering they have available. This is how they killed Waste, or maybe it will kill all of them, because she was too busy being angry at one man to put in the work of protecting the entire human race. She can squander her talents building cisterns and pipelines for acres of gunk they'll never be able to wade through, if that's what she thinks is best. In the end, Amelia gets on board, and 7243 is built as planned. The document continues with the operational mechanics of the engine, stating that it only abates materials which do not exist, and actually cannot process anything which does measurably exist. Essentially, the fact that a waste material exists at all means that it will never be processed by the engine, and must be abated by conventional means. Attempts to deposit any existing materials into the engine are invariably futile, as some sequence of events will occur that make it so that the materials never arrive at the engine. Typically, these are logistical failures, such as crates falling off a cargo ship, or the ship itself sinking, or any number of other chaotic and disastrous events that prevent the material from reaching the engine. Fortunately, this means that if a waste material does come into existence now, the Foundation knows that it will never reach the engine, so they don't have to make any disastrous attempts to send it that way. As mentioned, the logistical networks for everything still have to be in place for all waste material, existent or not. But if a material does exist, the Foundation can reroute the waste to backup facilities. It's noted also that the engine is highly sensitive to local chronological shift, and if a shift occurs, it is configured to reference the causal dependencies of its surroundings to reinforce its own chronology. There are 7 identified personnel, including Deering, Deering's brother, Amelia, and Placeholder, on whose actions the engine is causally dependent. So in case of an impending XK-class event, it's crucial that these individuals or their remains remain nearby. We're also told the origin of the engine, with Deering returning from an extended leave of absence in 2029 with newfound interest in novel achromatic abatement techniques. He submitted several project proposals advocating for the creation of experimental abatement mechanisms based upon various parascientific theories, but all were denied based on excessive cost and or lack of methodological competence. A year and a half later, one of these proposals was reconsidered by Placeholder McDoctor, who noted that the Pilgrim-Minkowski Center for Multidisciplinary Studies had verified Deering's relevant findings at scale. With backing by the PM Center and the Parachronology Division, the project was approved and was completed partway through 2032. In another undated note from Deering, he writes that sometimes waste is a good thing, like heat shedding. We work off our excess physical energy into sweat, radiating the remainder over time, or convect it into the winds of change, or conducting it into the cold spaces between warm bodies. This stabilizes the interval, preventing burnout. Waste can be transformative. For the following section of the document, we're given another notice from the Oracle Collective, alerting us that these documents exhibited temporary alteration from the perspective of our timeline, during and as a direct result of a local perceptual shift. So they're presented as they appeared during the time frame they describe. Basically, that means that the timestamps for the following instant log are obfuscated, and some parts of the document have been corrupted. It begins with a research site in Japan reporting the production of existing waste from several instances,
Can you hear me now?
with logistics being notified to reroute the waste to various fallback sites. It then reports full production of waste by all of the respective instances, indicating a comprehensive failure of its dedicated supply line within 80 hours. Logistics halts the relevant operations for immediate inspection. A containment site in Japan also reports full production of waste by all of their respective instances, indicating a collective failure of Japan's dedicated supply line. So additional logistics personnel are deployed for inspection.
You captured
They're
some
unable
sea.
to discern the cause of this eventual supply failure, and local fallback facilities have exceeded their capacity, so the excess is redirected to Australian fallback sites. Within the next 8 hours, 3 more containment sites also reported full production of waste, indicating a complete failure of all dedicated supply lines across Asia, Australia, and Eastern Europe. Logistics can't deploy sufficient personnel to every site. Achromatic abatement personnel are notified of an impending event of unclear nature, and a rigorous inspection begins of the engine and the relevant delivery system. Facilities across Western Europe report similar failures of waste, and abatement personnel discover that these failures have been occurring at a roughly consistent rate, spreading out existential abatement failure across all sites outside of North America,
Your team
as
rallied.
emergency transport contingencies are immediately activated
Enemy team is
worldwide
breaking.
to alleviate near-critical buildups of extant waste. The Parachronology Department begins a lateral chronological analysis protocol to determine the likelihood of chronological or other reality shifts,
What?
and the key personnel for the engine are immediately called to their posts. Due to the loss of
Why do I feel
AI-powered
this?
communication encryption services, because of the Lotus AI containing all deviant AI, Chinese militia groups intercept the logistics department's communications regarding the ongoing situation. Mainland China's government refuses entry to logistics transport vessels, citing a direct order of the GOC. Contingency systems are unable to account for the critical buildup of esoteric substances, resulting in a catastrophic hazardous materials breach and the loss of the 2 sites in Japan. Facilities across North America's western coast begin to experience existential abatement failure, and the Achromatic Abatement Department corrects their prior analysis, as the point of failure here is not the site in Japan, but rather it's Site 43, affecting the furthest away sites first. All of the key personnel except for Placeholder have gathered near the engine, and Reinders texts him repeatedly to get there. Placeholder eventually responds, asking when she needs him there, to which she says now. He replies that he's busy, and he has a time-traveling, universe-hopping teleportation machine, so he's sure he'll be where he needs to be, when he needs to be. She tells him under no circumstances will he fly into the eye of an esoteric hurricane with that thing, but he stops responding. The logistics branch is unable to discern a procedural cause of failure. The Achromatic Abatement section is unable to discern any fault with the engine. Parachronology is unable to detect any symptoms of imminent CK class, ZK class, or other XK class events, and the Temporal Anomalies Department forecasts a 0% probability of any impending reality shift, chronological shift, temporal pivot, timeline branch, timeline merge, or other
God, that
possible
felt
cause
bad.
of the engine's failure. The temporality annex, however, is unresponsive. SCP-179, Saul Susser, the entity located near the sun that warns the Foundation of extraterrestrial threats, is seen holding its head in its hands, apparently sobbing, although the meaning of this is unclear. Eventually, total existential abatement failure occurs across all relevant facilities, except those within 1,000 kilometers of Site-43. Several more fallback facilities fail, and contingency systems are beyond capacity. Reinder's texts placeholder some more, although much of the text has been lost. She says that neither of them are stupid, and tells him something if they live to see tomorrow. The document simply notes that the implications of her texts are unclear. With no discernible indication of the impending event's nature, it's presumed that some oblique malfunction of the engine will be responsible, so Reinders proposes the deactivation of the engine immediately following the delivery of all remaining waste in absentia. The waste material that doesn't exist needs to be voided into the engine to prevent a ZK-class temporal paradox. The O5 Council reports that extra-universal parties and contingency groups are entirely unresponsive, with emergency protocol Veilbreak enacted. All available resources are redirected toward abatement, cleanup, and contingency efforts, with SCP-2000 activated in standby mode. Reinders convenes remotely with the O5 Council, and she is incidentally informed of Black Site Facility 6488, where the Lotus AI is housed, and is informed of the true nature of Lotus's origin and operation, as well as its imminent planned deactivation. Reinders attempts to warn the Council of the potential ramification of its deactivation, but the connection is abruptly terminated by unknown means. She proceeds to disassemble and jury-rig nearby terminal components into a makeshift broadcast system, and attempts to hail Facility 6488 and all nearby sites, calling for any available respondents. As the final waste cart approaches the engine, all remaining personnel prepare for the first ever complete deactivation of the engine. Around the same time, Lotus begins its deactivation sequence, causing an unprecedented release of highly deviant artificial intelligences into various digital systems, globally and beyond. The engine successfully commences shutdown, with no faults detected. Deering begins arguing with Reinders, maintaining the position that their deactivation of the engine is the very event which retroactively caused this whole situation. The Paradox Exodus engine is then co-opted by Rogue AI, causing it and Placeholder to demanifest from consensus reality. Deering is interrupted mid-conversation by the spontaneous reactivation of the engine, with all internal cores hyperactivated, triggering chronological reinforcement contingency protocols. Reinders ordered the immediate shutdown of the engine via analog manual override, but maintenance personnel report confusion as the facility's PA system broadcasts conflicting instructions in a near-perfect imitation of Reinders' voice. Deering approaches Amelia, procures a heavily modified Temporal Anomalies Department jump watch from his pocket, and begins tapping it in frantic rhythm. Reinders exclaims and pulls Deering towards herself, attempting to stop him, but the device activates and both of them disappear. As the engine's latent stores of existing waste and paradoxically reinstated non-waste approach critical mass, an intense red hue begins to permeate the area. Multiple possible iterations of two of the Foundation doctors begin to manifest and overlap, signaling an imminent Copenhagen decoherence event. Amelia vocalizes distress and quickly exits the facility. The local time, as measured by all electronic devices, cycles rapidly through the calendar year, and the engine's scheduled automatic reference check triggers 122 times in quick succession. Apparitions of Deering attempt to override this every 3 seconds, but in his absence between attempts, the override is deemed inauthentic. The engine is unable to locate sufficient anchors for its definitive chronology, because most of the key personnel are absent, so it's forced to utilize a probabilistic metric, with multiple attempted micro-adjustments overlapping in local space-time. A large film projector reel manifests within Dr. Neo's skull, killing her instantly, and iterations of another doctor draw concealed weapons, firing upon each other simultaneously. Maintenance personnel begin to sever their own fingers and uncontrollably consume the lost blood. A fourth sublevel then manifests above the facility, containing something that is immediately aerosolized by ambient thaumic blood and incorporated into a coruscating halo suffusing the bedrock. Achromatic decontainment events increase in frequency and severity sevenfold as Amelia sprints down a narrow hallway towards an emergency bunker, but she trips over her own corpse and is knocked unconscious by the fall. Here, the document really becomes sparse, with something both exploding and imploding, something stated to must not exist and something that must exist, until the document states an error of a bad connection and ends. There's a lot to unpack there, but even more that's left as a temporary mystery of what exactly occurred in both the abatement facility and with the engine. It's clear that the big ball of wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey stuff has been messed with to an unfortunate degree. And perhaps Deering was right in that they themselves set about this situation by eventually shutting down the engine to try and fix the situation that shutting down the engine retroactively caused. It's a lot to wrap your head around, and it's also unclear what Lotus has to do with it, as the engine doesn't involve an AI, and what exactly Placeholder is up to. We'll find out more in part 2, but obviously things never go too well when someone at the Foundation tries to find a miraculous solution to a big problem.
Girl, when you call it quits, you could have done it right. You could have left the sound out of it when you said goodbye. You ruined everything I love, ripped my heart right out my chest. Girl, it's like there ain't nothing left. You set my world on fire. It's all I'm gone. I'm watching flames get higher, and I can't move on. I just gotta let it burn, burn, burn on down. Girl, without you, it don't turn, turn, turn around. You set my world on fire.
I would. Set this heat core. And guess what? Boom.
I can't see through the smoke. Piled up every memory, and you took the good with all the bad. Why'd you have to strike that match? It set my world on fire. It's all I'm gone. I'm watching flames get higher, and I can't move on. I just gotta let it burn, burn, burn on down. Girl, without you, it don't turn, turn, turn around. You set my world on fire. Ain't nothing left for me in this old nothing town. Guess all I'll be is ashes on the ground. So I watch it burn, burn, burn on down. Ain't nothing I can hold on to right now. You set my and girls that stole our hearts, gave us them bumps up on the wall. The way we live and the way we talk, gave us state that senior year, and country stores to buy that beer. A place to go, nobody knows when you take it in, you take it slow like that river rolls where that green grass grows. I can't explain it, oh, it's something, ain't it? Yeah, we sure painted it up, tore down the motor lane roads. We either stole every sign or let them in bullet holes. It wasn't nowhere as bad as we all said that it was. Yeah, looking back at it now, this town's been too good to us.
To us! To us! Oh man. Let's go with everybody. I am now ranked 2 with a gold. Will this be the day I hit platinum? What y'all think? Too good to us.
I can't explain it, all or something, ain't it? We don't have each other's numbers anymore. Make me dance Friday night. You're turning 64. Nobody, you've been 25. You don't dream about tomorrow. Everybody's got that one they can't forget. But you can't try to tell me.
I don't know. Oh, dude. I want to build a trick star deck.
When you change, could you explain it to me? Cause I've been feeling low, feeling low.
I would have to take somebody
Other
else's deck.
places on me. I ain't going home. 2 hours too fast. 6 shots in the morning. Catch me, I'm going. I need you to know that I'ma show you love life. Stop there for a long night. You're here on my mind. I need you to know that I could be there. Say that you need it. When the weekend calling for you. I go deep, yeah, baby. I'm dreaming of that to believe it's true. 'Cause I can feel I could be there. Say that you need it. When the weekend calling for you. I go deep, yeah, baby. I'm dreaming of that to believe it's true. 'Cause I can feel it.
I went.
Friday in the clubs, you can't go on. I settled on my freedom for it. If you wanna take charge, I'll follow. Now I ain't up. Now I'm looking back. No, since you been giving back. Don't think I can let you go. 2 hours too fast. 6 shots in the morning. Catch me, I'm going. I need you to know that I'ma show you love life. Stop there for a long night. You're here on my mind. I need you to know that I could be there. Say that you need it. When the weekend calling for you. I go deep, yeah, baby. I'm dreaming of that to believe it's true. 'Cause I can feel I could be there. Say that you need it. When the weekend calling for you. I go deep, yeah, baby. I'm dreaming of that to believe it's true. 'Cause I can feel it. I 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 feel it.
I come here every Wednesday. I love the band. Always sit in the same place. Cold beer in my hand. They know me by name and my go-to drink. Yeah, I come here every Wednesday. Out of the corner of my eye, see the door guy checking your ID. Don't come walking in like you own it, you own it. I hate to break it to you, you don't, yeah, you don't. You think you're such a star, but here's the funny part. No one even knows who you are. This is my bar. Yeah,
I
this
lost.
is my bar.
I think I lost. Yeah, I lost this one.
This is my
I've
bar.
misplayed so much right there.
Yeah, this is my bar. Been coming here for a long time. Before I met you, don't act surprised when you see me. Like you didn't have a clue that I'd be here tonight.
So what I'm gonna have to do-
Been coming here for a long time. Don't come walking in like you own it, you own it. I hate to break it to you, you don't, yeah, you don't. You think you're such a star, but here's the funny part. No one even knows who you are. This is my bar. Yeah, this is my bar.
Here it is. This is
my
what.
bar. Yeah, this is my bar. This is my bar. Yeah, this is my bar. This is my bar. Yeah, this is my bar.
It seems like yesterday we were cutting up in class. No worries in the world except chasing girls and burning gas. Then one day you wake up, you're tossing up them caps. Don't it seem like the good times go by too fast? Yeah, I wish time would tick a little slower. Sometimes it feels like a blink and then it's over. Better soak it in, better make it last. Live it up while we can, 'cause the good times go by too fast. Yeah, I wish time would tick a little over. Sometimes it feels like I'm blinking and it's over. Better soak it in, better make it last. Live it up while we can, cause the good times go by too fast.
Feels like, and it feels like, then it feels like. Do I have a filter on this? Is that why this doesn't want to work? That could be why. One, two, audio. Monitor and output. Okay. Oh, monitor off. Okay, let's do this.
It seems like yesterday we were cutting up in class.
SCP 7819. No vacancy. Living in a society means living by rules. Some of them spoken, but many of them unspoken. Every interaction we have with another person or with an establishment is predicated on the idea of rules and procedures, most of which we take for granted, and many of which don't necessarily have to be followed, but it's best practice for politeness and to keep things running smoothly. Checking in and staying at a hotel is one such interaction you might have that features a number of spoken and unspoken rules that we as a society have come to understand and accept. SCP-7819 takes this process, checking in and staying at a small roadside motel, and adds some more rules to the process. A lot, in fact. And they're quite specific. Let's take a look. SCP-7819 is a predatory location manifesting along exits of the U.S. highway system, generally appearing as a small roadside motel or hotel, always called the Rest Easy Inn.
They offered a choice.
In order for this location to manifest for a driver,
Submit
several
or die.
conditions have to be met, including the
Death.
driver being alone, the time
No
between
oath is
midnight
worth
and
such
4 a.m.,
fealty.
the driver had to have been driving
We
for at
did
least
what we
5
had
hours
to.
previously, and most
Some will look
seriously,
down on
the
us.
driver has to be either currently a Foundation
Brandis
employee
traitors.
or has been one in the past.
Let them do so at the end of our blades. We are survivors.
And tiredness, although it's currently unclear on whether or not this is an anomalous phenomenon or just a natural reaction to driving for several hours and seeing an opportunity for a break. This fatigue will continue until the driver exits the highway and pulls into the parking lot of the inn. If, however, they do not and continue on, this sense of fatigue will remain, and more anomalously, their vehicle will be seamlessly transported several miles backward, often without the driver's realization. They will then see the inn again, and should they continue to drive past it, the process will repeat until they get off the highway and park in the inn's parking lot. No other action will allow them to break the cycle, and the only way to break free from the phenomenon entirely is to park, enter the inn, and perform several specific activities. What follows is a SCP-7819 survival guide, compiled through a number of prior experiences that various Foundation employees have had and documented. It would seem that one has to be rather careful and specific about their actions in the inn in order to actually leave. And the document recommends that if you are in this situation, to remain calm and not rush, as accuracy and efficiency is more important for survival than speed. To begin with, you should bring your car into an empty parking space, trying to select one that's surrounded by other vehicles, as separating yourself from the pack would only attract attention. Once you've done so, take only what you need from your car, such as the device you're reading this document on, your keys, your purse or wallet, and a bag containing some toiletries and essentials. Luggage and clothing will only slow you down, and be sure that if you have a firearm, you do not take it with you. Before entering, you should spend some time in the parking lot, observing the other parked cars. You will see some oddities, such as wheels made of wood, unclear jumbles where logos and brand marks should be, and shapes or designs that do not correspond to any actual vehicles. You should also avoid looking through any of the windows. If there's a large burning vehicle in the parking lot, definitely do not investigate it, and if at all possible, pretend it isn't even there. You should also enter the lobby before the fire goes out. In an entry from Foundation researcher Adam Middleton, he says that he followed this protocol, pulling his vehicle into the last parking spot available in the lot. He grabbed the few things he had and exited his vehicle, finding himself parked next to a big Dodge Caravan, before realizing that it's more like if you described the Caravan to someone, and they described it to someone else, who made a model of it out of paper mache. He accidentally knocked his hand against it and found that it was made out of some kind of plastic. It was hollow. He started investigating the other cars then, finding them all to be odd like this. The logos and designs looked like cars he knew growing up, but upon closer inspection, they're all nonsensical. He wasn't frightened or anything, but it took him on edge, like when you know that someone's trying to put you at ease. After entering into the lobby of the inn, you should make your way to the front desk, which will be unoccupied. You may ring the bell once, it will sound pretty comforting, but you should wait there without exiting the lobby, and you should hum your favorite song to yourself as you wait. The silence in the lobby has been described as oppressive, but make sure to stop humming once you become aware of the noises coming from behind the counter. At that point, hop over where you'll find a closed door.
Let's do this shit.
Listen to the sounds being made and write them down. When the sounds get louder, repeatedly slam your fist against the door, making sure not to speak. Eventually, you'll be split a key to a room, although this may not work in the first attempt. So repeat the process until you succeed, at which point say thank you and depart. Agent Mari Kite noted that she heard pretty filthy noises coming from the other side, although they were soft enough that she had to press her ear against the door to hear anything. They were wet, slapping sounds, like someone thumping a drenched towel against the ground, over and over, along with a periodic wet coughing and a moaning. The moaning sounds were like someone in pain, as if they're starving to death, and it rises and falls in pitch.
Stay focused.
There's also someone
Shield
whispering,
strong.
and
Swords
sometimes
ready.
moaning and whispering and chopping are all at the same time. The sounds all stop. After a few seconds, the noise is resumed. The room key you will be given will inevitably be for a higher floor, and since you will be unable to find stairs, you'll have to use the elevator.
You
You'll
lost
notice that
zone
the
A.
elevator buttons are in an inexplicable pattern with unclear writing on them, so you should just press whichever one feels right. There will never be another person in the elevator with you, so if you do see someone, be aware that they are not you. Do not stop looking at them. Always stand with your back to the door. If the figure resembles a older man wearing a suit and overcoat, do not take the elevator. The figure will smile at you, compliment your appearance, and hold the door for you, repeatedly attempting to convince
You
you
lost
to
Zone C.
make sure to politely but firmly tell it that you are just passing through, and you'll wait for the next one, and stand beyond the threshold of the elevator, as it will not be able to pursue you. Eventually, the figure will move on. If the figure instead resembles a middle-aged woman in hiking gear, you may enter and take it on. The ride will take much longer, up to half an hour. Reciprocate but do not be honest. Openly and brazenly above every possible your ethnicity and age. If the figure instead resembles a young vagrant, it is safe to enter the elevator. The figure will not speak, but may offer you a hug, which you may or may not accept at your discretion. When you arrive at your floor, they may offer a small trinket, such as a tin duck or a ceramic ashtray, which you should accept gratefully and keep close at hand. Senior researcher Amir Marahi.
You captured Zone C.
Looking no more than 18 or 20 years old. During the ride, the look of his heart, and Amir let
Yo, this man just ran in total, bro.
handed him a matchbox filled with leaves, and Amir got off the elevator. Following these instructions, exit out of the elevator into a hallway of some kind. Your room key will be useful in locating your room, that either having no number on it or having no number. Instead, your room will make itself known to you when you find it, so you should begin walking down the hall. You should resist the urges to investigate the other rooms, as the doors have peepholes in them, and making eye contact may invite unwelcome attention. Instead,
You
keep
lost
your eyes
Zone
focused
C.
down, and ignore any. You should also avoid making any noises. Yes. The hallways will generally not have living rooms, and you may find various other spaces. Eventually, you will arrive at a crossroads, regardless of whether the exterior topology of the inn allows for it.
You captured Zone C.
As such, it's advised not to remain in them for more than a few minutes. Personnel will remain longer, reporting dull headaches and paranoia. This is best addressed by picking a random direction and walking down the hall. And although it's unclear whether the inn adapts to one's mind or the other way around, this has been the most effective method for arriving at one's room. As for which room is yours, the document only says that
You
you'll
lost
know it.
Zone C. You captured Zone A.
Every hotel has ever been together without thought. Eventually, it starts to get really the carpet brass veins, the pattern you might find on bus seats, and curtains nailed into the walls. Every successive set of doors kept getting lifted a few inches off the ground until they were literally halfway into the ceiling. He remarks that this isn't a place people were meant to be. And amidst the darkness and despair, there came a shining light. Our sponsor,
Those who bear stays.
Podcast. Spotify Podcast.
I'm like,
Or episode. Or computer.
I'm good.
feel a chillness in the air, but that's normal.
Those are bastards!
Until you've turned on all the lights and ensure there may be a door to an enjoyment room. If so, move a piece of furniture to make it more otherwise. The layout of the room will differ and may be bizarre, such as having mismatched dozens of chairs filling the room. But you should do your best to get comfortable. Note that the bathroom
Your
may
team
be locked
is
from the
ready.
inside, unless that's just when someone is inside, in which case you should bar the door to the best of your ability. You may keep the lights on or dim them, but either way you should get into a bed and pull the covers over yourself. If the room has a television, you may turn it on yourself. I'll suggest that running television delivers the best results. Eventually, you'll fall asleep. It's reported that along with a microwave that has food plugged in. This does it absolutely baffling, but it's designed by after that,
No revenge from that.
weirdest thing he'd experienced so far, but for some reason it messed with him. He got out and slipped into bed, feeling insanely tired almost immediately despite the circumstances, barely keeping his eyes open. Right as he was drifting off, though, it occurred to him that he hadn't checked under the bed. He's physically awake, but mentally exhausted. Around you are cool, and a small radio may be playing a song from a good quality signal. Try to do your best, but don't change. You may exit the hot tub and inspect the main pool, which you will find that the surface of the water has formed a thick, tight membrane that prevents objects from breaking through it. So don't step into the water as you will drown. Underneath the membrane, you may see shapes moving around, but just ignore them. At this point, you should re-enter the hot tub, this time fully submerging yourself. Once you go under, it will not feel warm at all, but rather painfully, bitingly cold, as though it were ice water. You should ignore this feeling and open your eyes, finding that the tub descends several feet deeper than expected. Swim to the bottom and grab the small object you see lying on the floor and inspect it after emerging from the water. You will then find your clothes neatly folded on a nearby table, so you should dry and redress yourself before heading back to your room. Agent Sabrina Maxwell notes how much she likes hotel pools, which are usually devoid of other patrons, allowing her to have a nice, calming space to be alone in. She says that this wasn't like that, though.
Okay, let's
Instead,
do
feeling
this.
wrong in some interminable,
Lego.
indescribable way. Every facet of it seemed designed for maximum discomfort, with the echo bouncing off the ceiling of water and close enough to your own voice to trip you up. The angles and contours of the pool were unnatural, like someone had never seen a pool before, and there were literally hundreds of life preservers hanging off the walls. She states that the main pool was unnerving, with everything under the surface appearing blurry, hard to make out, and there were 3 or 4 indistinct shapes moving around, swimming back and forth. One of them looked like another person, so she put her hand against the surface of the water, at which point the figure swam up and pressed its palm to her bosom, holding it there for a moment. Then it started slamming its fists against the membrane wildly, trying to tear through it, and she could hear it screeching from under the water. She screamed, moved backwards, grabbed the things, and ran. Thankfully, she only checked out the main pool after grabbing the object from the bottom of the hot tub,
be her engagement ring that she lost years ago after flushing it down the toilet of a hotel. On your way back to your room, you'll pass by the breakfast area attached to the lobby, and even though it will still be night outside, it will be open and the lights will be on.
Gave us that hilltop place to park, gave us some girls that stole
And then my teammate left me. Oh, am I surprised? No, I'm not. He was like, nope, fuck this. I'm out. Of course you are. Do that to us. Happened too good to us.
like that river rolls where that green grass grows. I can't explain it. You lost some ain't it?
There's nothing I could have done. They used 2 people.
If you wanna take charge, I'll follow. No, I am never looking back. No, since you've been giving that. Don't think I could let you go. So I just think that trust no more. I'll show you
I'll take that loss. I'll take that loss because we didn't play like a team. Okay. Homeboy only cared about his stats. Me. And then they just totaled the whole time. I can't get And then the gladiator calls the shot at Shelby. That's
like you didn't have a clue that I'd be here tonight wearing those chains you like.
and then they would stream sniping. The fuck? Damn.